In chapter 223 to 224, Conan materialized right in front of Obito, who was finishing off an Uchiha Chunin with a stab straight through his heart. Obito slowly blinked and tilted his head, trying to comprehend where the heck did all that paper appear from and who was the woman in front of him. Honestly, he was confused as heck. Toby is a good boy. He weakly tried as the body of the Chunin fell lifelessly onto the ground. Obviously. Conan patronizingly nodded, but her tone was totally sarcastic as her eyes glanced at the dead Uchiha between them. It didn't take Obito long to realize that something went horribly wrong with this straightforward operation. As such, he decided that useless banter was unnecessary and quickly sprang into an attack. Crossing the distance between himself and the patiently waiting woman, Obito lashed out with a kunai and gleefully watched as Conan tried to parry, only for her kunai to pass through him. To Obito's surprise, the only sight of shock on Conan's face was an almost pleased widening of her eyes. He didn't have a long time to see her expression, though, and even less to contemplate it. He quickly passed through her body in his intangible state, and the second he finally separated from her, he quickly spun on his heel and plunged his kunai deeply into her upper back, aiming straight for the heart. Obito watched his kunai enter Conan as brief satisfaction filled him, and thoughts of continuing with his mission sprang up in his head. It was only the sheer primal instinct, honed for years of preparation, to fight against the fabled yellow flash, that caused Obito to rapidly let go of the kunai embedded in Conan's back and switch into his intangible state, just as the Conan in front of him burst into paper slips and a very sharp tip of folded tesson suddenly poked out from his chest, causing him to numbly stare at it. That would go straight through my heart. He realized how close to death he came as cold sweat drenched his forehead. I didn't even realize when she got behind me. He slightly inclined his head to the side and instantly saw Conan standing there, lazily holding the fan still stabbed through his intangible form while she was wearing an amused expression, with one of her brows mockingly lifted upwards. It was an expression that reminded Obito of Kakashi's condescension in his early years, and for some reason, when he saw it on the deadly blue net, it really irked him somewhat fiercely. Gritting his teeth, Obito spun his body in a burst of speed and sprang again towards Conan, aiming to engage her in hand-to-hand combat, as that would provide him the most advantage considering his intangibility. His fist neared the calm Conan, and Obito expected her to block. That's why he was very surprised when she didn't react at all, and his fist burrowed into her chest all the way to the middle of his forearm. That's why he was even more surprised when Conan's body let out a small hiss as she briefly glowed orange before a resounding boom shook the street as numerous explosive tags in the paper clone reduced everything in their proximity to ash. "That almost got me," Obito murmured as he appeared a few feet from the small, newly made crater in the middle of the street, holding his right arm that sported nasty burns through the tattered sleeve. He only barely managed to switch with a clone, but the explosion still somewhat got him. His arm was half buried in the paper clone, and therefore his intangibility was useless at that moment. Obviously. Conan's leisure voice sounded from the crater, and Obito, much to his shame, actually gaped for a second as she stepped out from the smoking crater as fresh as daisies, ready for the second round. Quickly pulling himself together, Obito reassessed the threat the woman posed to him. Frankly, there were not many people he feared, but the blue net in front of him was doing quite a good job at making it into his personal "don't cross" list, all the while looking almost sinfully bored. Obito shuddered. "She clearly knows how to counter my Mangekyo. I have to be careful in further confrontation." He thought and decided to attack again. For the next 30 minutes, Conan and Obito fought back and forth, playing an odd game of cat and mouse with their roles reversing after every strike. When Obito struck, Conan's figure burst into paper, and Obito usually found himself skewered from behind, as new Conan always appeared there, no matter how prepared for it he was. It was supremely irritating in his humble opinion. When Conan struck, Obito simply relied on his intangibility to both avoid damage and get an opportunity to strike back. Now that he was extremely cautious, his opponent was clearly having as much difficulty landing a meaningful attack as he was, since he was under the intangibility most of the time. Now, if only he knew why the blue net had such an amused and smug smile plastered on her face. Obito slashed his kunai through Conan's neck, not at all surprised when his target burst into paper. He was already in the process of spinning around, expecting new Conan to appear from behind, only for his instincts to mockingly scream, "Dodge" at him, causing him to jump away, just as the thrice-damned Tesson of Conan passed the spot his neck was just a second ago. Obito's eyes widened as he slid to halt when he noticed that the Conan whose throat he slit was still there, her slit throat made of slips of paper, clearly not injured at all as her throat reformed in matters of seconds. So, not only she can burst into paper and appear behind me, now she can even disregard lethal damage by turning into paper. Isn't this just plain cheating? Complained the Soul Ninja, who could go intangible at will without any significant restriction. That singular lapse in judgment was enough for Conan, however. A sharp pain suddenly erupted from Obito's chest as blood burst from his mouth. He could only briefly note that he was alive because he subconsciously leaned his body to the right, and as such, the spike made of paper missed his heart. He fell on one knee, gritting his teeth at the satisfied expression of his opponent. "How?" he rasped in disbelief that he was caught off guard. "I counted, obviously." Conan snorted and rolled her eyes at the wide eyes of Obito. Inwardly, however, Conan was a bit sullen that she couldn't make the paper spike from exploding tags. Unfortunately for her, during the fight, she found out that Obito was far too sensitive to chakra and had almost inhuman instincts, so she was severely limited in her offensive means. That's why she didn't even bother using wind chakra in the clash. With her opponent's chakra sensing ability, it would be a waste of chakra. "Counter! Shit!" Obito mentally cursed and spat the blood that pooled in his mouth as he realized, with no small amount of horror, the woman in front of him somehow grasped the limit of his intangibility in their short fight. Suddenly, something clicked in his mind and he couldn't help but shudder. So that's why she fought with me for the last 30 minutes. She was trying to gauge the limits of my abilities. Obito wanted to berate himself for his carelessness. The limit of his Mangekyo Sharingan was the only weakness he had, considering he wasn't losing his eyesight thanks to the Hashirama cells implanted in him. To think somebody would so easily deduce it during a fight. Yes, the woman in front of him was definitely getting on his feared list. Grimacing, he curiously looked at the dangerous blue net in front of him and asked, "Aren't you going to finish me?" Conan pointedly looked at him as if he was a total idiot. "You would just go intangible again." Fair enough. Obito painfully chuckled. In fact, he was very happy he decided to keep some of his abilities secret and didn't use his Mokaton in the fight, because he was half suspicious the woman in front of him would pull out some unexplainable shit. Again, he half expected to be turned into paper at this rate, but that was delusional even for him, right? In fact, Conan still tried to control the paper spike skewing his chest, but the chakra Obito was pushing into it was causing quite an interference. He definitely knew what he was doing, she mused. Well, Toby had enough. You are not a good girl, you cheating piece of ahem. Obito slipped into his cheerful persona, not minding the winces he did mid-speech before he went serious again. Next time we meet, I will be prepared. And with that, he disappeared in a swirl, making Conan chuckle at the empty threat. Such a drama queen. Rei gave the unconscious Izumi and the corpse of her grandmother to the members of his Shadow Corps, and they quickly set to work, pulling out a scroll with 2 corpses of bandits. The members of Shadow Corps then drew a bit of blood from both Izumi and her grandmother's corpse and used a special sealing technique that would mimic the appearance of the person keyed to the blood seal. It didn't take even 2 minutes for the Shadow Corps members to produce 2 flawless replicas of both Izumi and her grandmother's corpse. Naturally, both came with the added bonus of having their eyes damaged, so nobody could find out these replicas were not Uchiha corpses. Rei really wondered how Danzo would react to that little surprise. It would take blood tests to find out these bodies do not belong to the members of the Uchiha clan. Alas, the last component the Shadow Corps added to these replicas of the Uchiha members' corpses was a special creation of Tsunade that completely dissolved an injected body precisely 6 hours after the administration. It was a pity it only worked on dead bodies, but for the current situation, it was golden. It wouldn't take long for the massacre to be discovered. After that, it will most likely take at least 2 hours to clean up and transfer the bodies into a morgue or, in case of the bodies taken by route, wherever Danzo would order his cronies to bring them. Rei completely banked on the chaos effect such an event will have on the village. He believed nobody would immediately go and draw blood samples for tests, since the corpses will be found in the Uchiha compound and will look like the Uchiha clan members. By the time somebody decided to take blood samples, the bodies would be long ago dissolved. Even if somebody did take the blood samples of 1 or 2 bodies in a timely manner, it wouldn't matter much, as there will be no actual proof of any kind of foul play. At least, nothing that could be factually proven. At best, there would be some unclean speculations that could easily be written as non-Uchiha visiting the compound during the fateful night. As for the dissolution of bodies, Rei was fully intending to let Konoha make their own assumptions. His bet? He believed Konoha higher-ups would simply write it off as a secret way of the Uchiha clan to prevent their bodies from falling into the hands of Konoha. After all, they did plan a rebellion in a few days, so having a way to prevent such a thing would be sensible. Considering the Uchiha clan liked to burn their deceased, it wouldn't be such a stretch. Naturally, it didn't really matter to Rei if the Konoha higher-ups assumed as such, or if they came with their own theory. He didn't intend to leave any proof that someone not from Konoha intervened. Done with replicating the bodies, Rei watched as Izumi's body was put into stasis before being sealed into a prisoner scroll, while the corpse of her grandmother was put into a storage scroll. And they thought me mad when I said we are going to relocate most of the Uchiha clan overnight. Rei snorted as he remembered the expression of his Shadow Corps commander Shizuka Kaguya and many more division leaders of his village when he told them about the goal of this mission. Infiltrating Konoha with 50 ninjas was one thing. Stealing the entirety of the Uchiha clan without leaving any proof and putting the blame on the back of Itachi Uchiha was quite another kind of crazy. And yet, here we are. Rei heard Conan's voice from behind and smirked. Indeed, dear, indeed. Well, nobody said it would be a voluntary relocation, Rei shrugged. I assume you were satisfied with your outing. He turned towards Conan before putting his hand around her shoulder, letting her snuggle into him as they watched their ninjas do their job, while the duo simply lazed around. After all, there were certain advantages to being the leaders. I must confess, I had no idea what you meant when you said I should go and play with the stronger one. Conan sighed. To think you just wanted me to experience how you feel when you fight against me. She shook her head in exasperation. But yes, I now see how fighting against somebody almost impossible to hit could be frustrating. Rei heard her indifferent tone, but deep inside of it, he noticed a slight undertone of annoyance. Reassuringly putting his hand onto Conan's head, caressing her hair, he coaxed, I simply wanted you to gain inspiration. You are already almost impossible to hit without highly destructive area of effect attacks. The guy you fought, though, he could easily survive those. Sure, he had other weaknesses, but still, Ray explained. No way am I admitting I simply wanted her to know how frustrating it is fighting against her. Right. Conan good-naturedly rolled her eyes at him, not believing him, but decided to change the topic. How was our little scapegoat? You wanted to test him yourself. Was he any good? Oh, Itachi? Well, he was certainly a sensible kid, retreated when he realized he doesn't have a chance and is quite disadvantaged. To be honest, he was impressive for a 13-year-old kid. We had only one exchange, and yet it was very informative about his preferences and style. Ray hummed, before pausing slightly in order to recollect his thoughts. I think he was a bit hyped up in rumors, though. He is a technical fighter who depends on precision, subtlety, and speed. Considering he is a kid, it is smart. He decided to develop speed and dexterity rather than strength. Again, considering his age, there is no wonder he decided to go the route of the genjutsu user, since it takes the least amount of chakra, but requires incredible control. Rather than being a prodigy, he is simply having something called common sense and a usable brain. Since he couldn't become a ninjutsu-heavy fighter because of his kiddie reserves or depend on his body strength, he decided to develop in a way where his young age would not be detrimental. I will be putting together a file for him after we get back home, and you can get a better picture. But yeah, he will be a good scapegoat. I doubt Konoha will catch him anytime soon. Ray shrugged. Conan giggled. Poor guy. He kinda deserves it too, though. Choosing to slaughter his own blood when he could simply ask the daimyo for help. She snorted. You know these political moves are not widely known. He probably didn't even realize there is a daimyo. Most ninjas don't after being brainwashed by this fabled will of fire, Ray snarked. Well, their loss, our gain. It was then Shizuka Kaguya approached the duo. We are finished, Ray-sama, Conan-sama. Results? Conan asked, quickly snapping into her serious mode. We packed the clan library, money and valuables. We substituted every corpse or living Uchiha with replicas and made sure to erase every clue about our presence here tonight. Uchiha Itachi was let through as instructed, but he managed to kill his parents before escaping. As for the Uchiha clan members, we are only missing the youngest son of the clan head, Uchiha Sasuke. Conan and Ray looked at each other at that. Neither expected any Uchiha missing. The only way he could not be accounted for is if he was not present in the Uchiha compound. Ray could only wryly smile as a decision had to be made. I guess that's all we can do for tonight, he said, more for Conan rather than Shizuka. Yeah, better forget the kid. Konoha will take care of him. We can't afford to be discovered just because he decided to not be present for his execution, Conan said, amused. Sure, she and Ray probably could take Konoha on, but their shadow cores would be obliterated if they tried to fight. 52 versus the entire village were not good odds, not at all. Okay, Shizuka, good job. Give the order for retreat, Ray ordered, before smiling mischievously at Conan. Well, I, for one, am very curious how Ringo fared on her little assignment. Remembering what Ray made Ringo do, Conan suddenly found herself in a fit of unstoppable giggles.